Well, it's October 1st, and it's starting to cool down a little bit. So it's not like miserably hot to be out in the garage or outside. So I thought this might be a good time to pull this engine back out of this dart here. Yeah, I don't like pulling the engines out of Chryslers because they're kind of a pain in the ass. The easiest way to do this is to lift the car off the K-member, but it's kind of a time consuming, and it's not difficult, it's just a pain in the ass. But enough of that nonsense. We need to get this engine, like I got a mouse in my pocket. I need to get this engine out from underneath this car. So, come along for the ride if you want. So, there it is. You know, after you do this a couple times, it's not so intimidating anymore. But if you've never done it before, it can be. For right now, I need to get this on the test stand, and when we come back, I'll show you how I lifted this body up off the K-member. All right, so here we are at the front of the car. And this is the core support, front bumper. And right down here is the original pick point. This is where the apparatus that actually carried the body in the factory, this is where they picked it from, and this is what, they lowered everything down onto the K-member and stuff and installed that at the factory. This is the pick point. What I did here is I modified my chain, made a little T-nut to fit in that little slot, like so I can pick it up. Now, as you can imagine, it's got to go way higher than that to get the engine back underneath the car, but you get the general idea. I just need to pick up the front of the car because I need to get my jack under the rear axle so I can slide the back end of the car over a few feet. So that's how I picked up the front of the car. Okay, so on further review, I kind of suspected this was going to have to happen. You see the flex plate on a Chrysler is a little bit different than the flex plate on a Chevy. The torque converter has the ring gear for the starter, and these, at least the small blocks, I'm fairly confident, and I might be wrong, but I'm fairly confident the big blocks are the same way. The starter's mounted on the transmission, not on the engine like on a Chevy. So, coincidentally, if you want to have a test stand for a Chrysler, you need to also have a flywheel and a bell housing for standard transmission to be able to make that work. The starter issue I could probably work around by building a plate to mount the starter to that just would go in the place of a bell housing, and to get a flywheel. But I looked around on the interwebs last night, and flywheels ain't cheap. $100 and up. And I'm not going to invest $100 in a flywheel that I'm not going to use. So, and the other alternative is, of course, to run the torque converter on this and run it dry. And best case scenario, the torque converter would be rendered junk. Worst case scenario, the welds break on the torque converter, and it goes flying across the room when the engine's turning at 2,500 RPMs or 2,000 RPMs. And neither one of those are very good options. So this is what I'm going to end up doing. I'm going to have to modify my test stand here again and make it so that I can put the transmission on here. And I'll have to put the cheapest, I guess it's the cheapest alternative, a few gallons of ATF, you know, you just run it with the transmission on the test stand. So that's what I'm going to do. So next time you see this, it'll have a tranny hanging off the back. And I'll have to make some kind of safety loop for the output shaft. But
Don't be Richard.
There. I had to cut the rear mount for the Chevy mount, the rear Chevy mount. I had to cut that off. You can probably see where it was welded on there. It was just had two welds on one side of the tubing there, so cut, and the piece came off, and then I modified. That's where the original control panel was, and I have to make a new control panel. But yeah, that's how I'm gonna have to do that with the transmission and everything on it. I'll have to probably make a safety loop. That's not the right yoke. I just got that in there to keep the seal from drying up. But I got the right yoke to go in there, and then I'll put like a piece of steel pipe over top of that, so if I happen to run through the gears, I don't get caught up in it. And right now I'm going to go in the shed and get the starter and mount that, and maybe mock up the headers, and yeah. Stay tuned.